and welcome to the Actual Tech Media MegaCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information to cover with you. Let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. Now, if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Also, keep in mind that if you have any tech issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you. So throughout today's MegaCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all of your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. And if we do not get to your question during the webinar, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us today will be following up with you after we wrap. All right, next up on our tour, there are going to be lots of cool aha moments in the MegaCast today, and if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's MegaCast will automatically get added to your post. And our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the Handouts tab for some resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection of solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. And if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes we will be giving away throughout the MegaCast today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. You do need to be in attendance here live at the webinar in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all winners after we wrap the MegaCast today. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, hey, if you're not sure what those are, no problem. You can find the full T's and C's in that Handouts tab. Again, just click into the Handouts section, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember here today is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. In today's MegaCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all the questions asked after the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about winning, and we will get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the MegaCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going. So let's connect on social. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content right away after we wrap, you want to jump right in, make sure that you subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and to grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you're going to find a link to do that right there in that Handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected after we wrap today. Now, both you and your coworker, your friend, could win a prize, and we actually hold those drawings every month. So be sure you refer somebody awesome before you head out today. It could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your Handouts tab and fill out the application. Then the Actual Tech crew will match you with some vendors that we think you should be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you can choose to join in, like surveys or test running new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you will learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker in your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, how to prevent and recover. The site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. So go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books are going to work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and they are completely free, super easy. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in the Handouts tab as well. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get rolling.
All right. Well, hi, hello. I hope that you are ready for the event today, because today we are talking about Shift Left, best practices and tools for handling security earlier in the DevOps process. And I absolutely love this topic because it's about strategy. It's about approaches. It's about bringing security concerns and considerations in earlier when we look at our processes and timelines, just like we all did a while back when we decided to start collaborating earlier on in those processes to connect development and operational needs. Well, that is how DevOps was born. And now we have this need to be thinking about security all the time and early on. So we shift left, and we bring in that security lens as early as possible. Now, I know that sometimes ideas like this can feel a little bit buzzwordy, but really, this is an important nuance. It is more than just a word. As I said at the start, it's an approach, it's a strategy, and that is super cool. If you are still not convinced, or hey, maybe you like the idea of DevSecOps, but you're still not sure how to get started, and we've got you covered either way. Luckily, the awesome folks here at Rubrik, Progress Chef, Panther, and Palo Alto Networks have sent some of their top experts to help us navigate this conversation all about shifting left. What is it, why it's important, and how it can enhance your organization, and how you can get started. This is going to be a great day. I can't wait to jump in. So let's get the content rolling. First, I just want to once again reintroduce myself. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm a moderator here at Actual Tech Media. Now, my fellow moderators, Scott Becker and Keith Ward, will be here with us throughout the day on live chat. And Keith Ward is waiting in the wings right now with our keynote speaker today. So we will get him out here with us in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure I tell you all about the prizes. So today on the MegaCast, you could win one of 3 Kindle Scribes. How cool is that? Plus, we have a $300 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away every 30 minutes to lucky winners who are here live and present with us at the MegaCast. Now, as I mentioned in the housekeeping chat this morning, you can find the full T's and C's linked in the Handouts tab. So if you have any questions about whether or not you meet the terms and conditions for a prize, head on over to that Handouts tab and you can find them there. All right, well, that was it for housekeeping. We got through that very quickly, which is great because we have lots to get into today. And I am so excited to introduce you all to our keynote speaker who's waiting in the wings with our wonderful friend and colleague, Keith Ward. Now, today, Keith is going to be chatting with Dan Sullivan, data architect, data engineer, cloud architect, author, and really cool speaker. So Dan, Keith, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm very excited to hear all of the things that you have in store for us today, and I'm going to kick things on over to you. Take it away, guys.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this MegaCast about shifting left and the DevOps process. I am Keith Ward, a moderator with Actual Tech Media, and I am always delighted to be here with Dan Sullivan. Dan is a cloud architect and author, has a lot of experience in this space, and we're truly fortunate to have him on today. Dan, great to see you again.
Hey, Keith, it's great to be here again. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's start with the definition. It's easy to get jargony, in these spaces and assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. But let's get your definition of what it means in this context to shift left.
Okay, yeah, I think the idea, it kind of stems from this sort of, if you visualize sort of like the DevOps process and software development as moving from left to right, where left is sort of at the beginning and right is sort of, oh, it's at the end. We've got things in production, we're monitoring, we're in great shape. The idea behind Shift Left is that we want to find security vulnerabilities or understand threats and risks as early as possible. So this idea of shifting left is, oh, let's not wait to roll something out to production to find out we have a vulnerability. Let's, implement best practices around security as early as possible in our development cycle. So really shifting left means shifting more toward early in the development phase rather than later in the phase.
So, with that definition, why is this becoming important now? What sort of trends or movements are making this idea of shift left necessary?
Yeah, well, there are a few things. I mean, obviously, there's the risk profile. Like when we roll something out, we're online, we're connected, we are basically exposing our systems to the world, and so we want to make sure that we've hardened them as much as possible. We're protecting things, we're mitigating for risks, and so there's this real push to kind of find vulnerabilities early. Also, it's easier to address vulnerabilities, like in a sense of, oh, we can alter our design, we can change our libraries, we can do things, and it costs less when we're sort of in the left end of this spectrum of the continuum. If we have something rolled out to production, we've got it on, a bunch of different development environments and production environments, and we need to update something in production, it's more costly. So really, some of the big drivers are, just a better understanding of the risk profile that we function in, the drive to reduce costs, and also to do things like improve compliance. There are a number of different factors that sort of are pushing us more toward the left. Some of them are more technical, like the idea like we want to really implement defense in depth, and that helps to start early, like think about it early. And then some of them are more business oriented, like we need to be in compliance and we want to control our development costs. So I think there are multiple factors from different sort of perspectives that are pushing us to move more to the left in this area.
And the more that we continue to adopt these particular ideas, the better, really, because as you say, there's a whole host of advantages to it. So, given that, what would you say are some best practices that we can use when it comes to shifting left to help improve security?
Sure. Yeah, there are definitely some really like well-defined, like people generally accept. They include, starting testing early in the software development cycle, multiple kinds of tests. We want unit testing, we want integration testing. We want to think about threat modeling also. So as we're building our systems, we want to think not just what we want our systems to do, but what if an adversary or, a malicious actor were to gain access to our system? What kinds of things could they do? What they attempt to do? What do we have of value, like customer data that might be, a target for being attacked? So we want to think about those things as well. So part of it is, definitely automating and testing early and threat modeling. We also want to focus on critical functionality. So we want to understand, of all of the functions that we plan on building and all the different microservices that might be in our architecture, which ones are most critical, which ones do we need to harden the most, and then and that helps with like prioritizing. Where are we going to allocate our resources with regards to focusing on risks and particular threats. And I'd say another best practice is just using whatever managed services might be available. Like vulnerability scanning is really sort of essential. So we want to make sure we understand things like, well, what are vulnerability databases? How are they used? How do we use those in practice with regards to, say, maybe we get a vulnerability scan report and we've got tens or hundreds of potential vulnerabilities. How do we prioritize those? So you want to think in terms of, what are the most important issues for you? And this, again, comes into like the threat modeling and understanding what are your biggest risks and where do you need to focus your attention. So those are some of the best practices that come into play with Shift Left.
Gotcha. Now let's broaden that idea just a little bit here. What are some of the things to keep in mind as your organization adopts shift left practices? That could be, gotchas or other priorities, or just some general guidelines here that you might provide to organizations.
I think when you're first starting, probably some things to keep in mind is that one of the things you want to do is kind of change the mindset. Like those of us who work in architecture and software development, it doesn't matter whether we focus on cloud or data or networking. Security is always an element of what we do. It's like if we're in IT, we do security in some way, shape, or form. So we want to sort of promote this mindset that security is part of all of our jobs. And so that comes in different ways, like helping people understand or acquire skills around understanding what are some security issues, what kind of threats are we particularly interested in, and again, that may depend on your role. A data architect will probably have different issues that they're concerned about than, say, a network engineer. But we really need people on our teams to be able to drill down deeply in their own areas. But also, it's kind of like having that idea of a T set of skills where you're deep in one area but broad in others. I mean, so a data architect needs to understand some level of networking security. So I'd say definitely, helping kind of that mindset. I think thinking in terms of automation right from the start is really important. If you're using agile development practices and you're developing, if you're developing cloud native applications, you're probably using agile methodologies. The idea of shift left fits really well with agile. So start thinking about how you can incorporate more emphasis on security with your current existing practices about how you do, everything from retros to, your meetings about how you maybe document or prioritize your backlog. You want security, excuse me, sorry. You want security to be woven into the fabric of what you do in your agile practices. I think those will definitely help. It also helps to, again, use different kinds of security testing. We want to think of like static analysis, dynamic analysis. But again, all of these testing things, really automation, it really comes down to, in many ways, to having automated tools, because we need to be able to do these processes repeatedly because we're constantly rolling out code, we're constantly rolling out new features, changing things. And so we need to have like a stable of security tests that push on our software in different ways. We need to be able to do that repeatedly and cost effectively. And that's where the automation comes in. So those are the things I would shift, security mindset, automation, and really being comprehensive in your testing.
So to kind of borrow and revise the old phrase from the Ford commercials, security is job one, but for everyone, right? Fair or not, there has been a perception over the years that developers especially didn't pay security enough attention. And
Yes.
so now it's not just the security team, it's not just developers. It is everyone in the organization, right down to the people who answer the phone for social engineering and all of
Yes.
that. We all have to have a security mindset. And if we do that, then we're all going to be safer, ultimately, aren't we? Dan, as always, it's been a pleasure to have you on and to help you or to help us kind of reconfigure our minds and helping us see why we need to all shift left for better security. Dan Sullivan, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks, Keith. It was great to talk with you again.
Well, thanks to both of you. I'm so glad we got to start our day with a chat, a Dan Keith chat. That's always the best way to kick off a session here. Now, we have a question for all of you. And what we're wondering is about your timelines. So, we go through this at the start of most of our MegaCast and EcoCast. So you guys are familiar with this question. And you know by now that the reason that we're looking at this is because if you're thinking that you need to make shorter term decisions, we want to make sure that we're hitting you with speakers that are really addressing solutions towards, the here and now, versus if you're thinking about something longer term. Now, today we're talking strategies and approaches. So my guess is that maybe the change you need to affect is shorter term, but you're thinking with a longer term hat on. And of course, we're looking maybe already at 2024. So there's no wrong answers here for the timeline, and not sure is a great answer. Not sure is a totally acceptable answer in this case, because when we're talking about these strategic approaches, we don't always know. It's not as simple as A equals B or A plus B equals DevSecOps. We're kind of going to play a little bit and think a little bit more on psychology and change management and all these sorts of fun things that you all know that I love getting into. Well, speaking of which, we've got a lot of great information coming our way that's going to help us make some of these decisions, and I'm very excited to get into it. So I'm going to bring out our first expert speakers here with us today. And as you can see, we are definitely kicking things off with a dynamic duo here with us from the Rubric crew. I'm very happy to introduce you all to our first expert presenters on the MegaCast today, and that is Christina Avranova, Product Marketing Manager, Enterprise Software, and Ben Meadowcroft, Principal Product Manager, both from Rubrik. Christina and Ben, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is great to see you here again on a MegaCast. I always enjoy chatting with you both, and I know you've got some great content lined up for us. So I'm going to step back, and Christina, I think you're going to take the mic first, so I'll hand things over to you. Take it away.
My name is Christina Avrianova, and I'm on the product marketing team. And together with me is Ben Meadowcroft, Director of Product Management. Today, we're going to talk about the rise of the containers and how do you protect containers. We will wrap it up by introducing data management for Kubernetes. Exciting, isn't it? So let's dive in. Once upon a time, a developer will finish writing the code and then throw it over the wall for IT to manage. So when the 3 a.m. call came, it was IT who had to deal with the issue. And when the inevitable "what happened" question got asked, all the developer would say is, well, it works on my machine. And that doesn't happen that much anymore, right? We wish. And let's just say it happens a little less. The technology growth over the past few decades has been so big that even Moore's Law couldn't keep up. The ability to deliver new products and services as a differentiator, or for some to simply stay in the game, has put pressure on businesses to modernize, transform, and innovate. We saw the rise of the agile methodology, DevOps practices, application proliferation, which in turn drove new infrastructure choices, all in the quest to meet customer expectations and increase operational efficiency. We saw the industry evolve from the monolith applications, then the virtualization of hardware. Then we saw the rise of the cloud. And as team began to take advantage of those new technologies, application deployment crossed the traditional boundaries. But the application behavior was different from one environment than another. And the problem, well, it worked on my machine, became much more frequent and much more obvious. So then came the containers. And containers gave developers just the right agility, along with the ability to create predictable environments, so now applications can easily be shuttled between environments, but the software will continue to run reliably. And while the containers were godsend for developers, they became a nightmare for IT to manage. Enter Kubernetes, an open source container platform which quickly became the de facto standard for managing containers. Kubernetes is a must-have and the only platform offered as a managed service by all the big public cloud vendors, AWS, Azure, GCP, DigitalOcean, IBM, and so on. With Kubernetes, applications can scale on demand. Deployment is quicker and more predictive. So now developers can roll more and more enhancements and new features to ultimately deliver on the organization goal and vision. Kubernetes delivers a desired state approach to orchestrating the application deployment. Namely, it defines what a system should look like in terms of storage, elasticity, resources, security. But I can hear what you're already thinking. Wait a minute, aren't containers supposed to be stateless? Aren't these new application patterns designed to be more ephemeral, not require persistence? Ben, isn't this the case?
Absolutely, Christina. This is one of the things that I've heard many times as we've been talking about Kubernetes with our customers. You know, a lot of the early impressions about Kubernetes and a lot of what it was focused on was really delivering, that for those ephemeral workloads, something that was not stateless. So why are we talking about containers and data protection now? Well, this is one of the things that we have seen change over the last few years as we've been discussing this with our customers. While containers were originally targeted for those stateless applications or the stateless portions of the applications, and you would see things like application methodologies like 12-factor applications that were really aligned with that view and saying, hey, the state should be external to this stateless portion of the application. That was really the sweet spot for containers initially. But what we've been seeing is that as people have been developing these new applications, these new workloads that we've been talking about, they're now really looking to get some of the same benefits that they got from orchestration of the containerized application with the database and the persistent tiers of the application as well. Those systems, they want to deploy those on containers as well to get some of those same benefits. And addressing that need, that requirement, is why we see things evolving in the Kubernetes space. Why we see things like stateful sets, persistent volumes, snapshots, and so on becoming part of Kubernetes now. And as you can imagine, as soon as we start putting persistent data into Kubernetes, we start putting that application data and having it managed by Kubernetes. Now we also have to think about how we protect and secure that data as well. So when we talk about that protection, how do we protect that? What does that mean? Well, this is where we really have to look at how data is present within the Kubernetes environment, and what are some of those key pieces of data that do need protection applied to them. And this is in contrast to, as Christina was mentioning earlier, some of the monolithic patterns that we saw with applications. With the more containerized approach to application development, we see these components being split out. And so, things like persistent volumes, whereas if you were deploying onto a physical machine or onto a virtual machine, often the virtual machine, would contain the persistent data. It would have those VMDKs, those virtual disks, attached directly to the VM and be a constituent part of the VM, really be tied to the lifecycle of the virtual machine. As well as that virtual machine, that physical system, really being where the application was deployed and configured, as well as the application binaries being installed as well. And so everything was all lumped together. What containerization and what we see with the orchestration of containers with Kubernetes is really these concerns being separated out, and in a very much a cloud-like model where persistent data is separate from the running processes. Persistent volumes are now attached and detached from those workloads, and so persistent volumes is one of the key areas of data that we need to look at protecting with Kubernetes. This is where the application data lives. And then other things that we need to look at protecting as well include things like the application configuration, how it's defined, the running configuration of the application. And this is really important for us to be able to understand, how the application is deployed and how it's protected, what it consists of, and being able to back up those associated resources. And so with protection of Kubernetes, we really need to look at all of these different aspects of protection in concert as part of a protection solution. So that's why Christina and I are really excited to introduce to you, what Rubrik is doing for data management on Kubernetes, and talk a little bit about our upcoming release and some of the capabilities that we'll be delivering to help you better manage and protect your Kubernetes environment. Let's get started and dive in. So to give you a quick overview, there were a few key things that we were really focused on when it came to Rubrik's Kubernetes protection. A couple of the key things that we really wanted to ensure we delivered. And these were based on some really in-depth conversations with some of our key customers who were really looking for us to bring some of those key capabilities, those key benefits of Rubrik into the Kubernetes space. So the first one of these, as we were talking with our customers, what they really emphasized was that, they were really moving to Kubernetes, developing these new applications and replatforming applications, re-architecting them, really to get some of those benefits that Christina was talking about earlier. Improved agility, the ability to scale up, scale down, and really all of the orchestration goodness that comes with Kubernetes as part of that core platform. And when we have an application that's deployed onto such I would say elastic platform, something that scales down, really a solution that is job centric or is based on predefined schedules and things like that isn't really a great fit. And this is, one of the things that we saw, a key benefit of Rubrik being that policy driven approach that we've taken from day one with our SLA domains, the ability to specify those requirements for data protection and be able to apply them to your workloads. And we saw this being a great match for what we do with Kubernetes protection, because as the workloads scale and change, our dynamic policy-driven approach is really a great match for that. So this was really the foundation of what we are releasing in this upcoming release. The second thing, of course, was the ability to properly and consistently back up and restore the applications running on that Kubernetes environment. And this includes the ability to back up those applications, all of the associated resources with them, so that you're able to capture that consistent view of the application and be able to restore it back to the original location or somewhere else. But not just recovering the application, but one of the great benefits of Rubrik is the ability that we have to index that data and give you that global search capabilities and recovery options as well. So we're able to not just recover the application that you've protected within Kubernetes, but also individual persistent volumes or even specific files on those volumes as well. And then, of course, the full recovery of the application back to the original location or even to another cluster is a key part of the offering. And then for me, one of the things that was most important was to ensure that we brought those same capabilities around security to our Kubernetes protection. One of the things that we've really focused on from day one at Rubrik is that providing that secure platform, and particularly an immutable data platform. So as we bring the data from Kubernetes into the Rubrik control, we're able to do so on an immutable data management platform, where we're able to capture those point-in-time copies of the data and store them immutably, so that you retain access to them. They can't be corrupted or modified. So you always have that good point in time to be able to recover from and ensure that you maintain availability of your data, despite what adversaries may throw at you. So, these were some of the really key things that we wanted to deliver in our upcoming release. The policy-driven approach, the full backup of the application, the persistent volume information, the configuration of the application, and the ability to recover individual files, folders, recover volumes, as well as recover entire applications, both back to the original location or to other Kubernetes clusters that you have configured within your environment. And then, of course, building this all on top of Rubrik's data management platform, giving all of those capabilities that our customers love around immutability and security, and bringing that to bear on this environment. So with that, let me dive into a little bit more detail and really show you what we're doing. So I'm going to go through a few demos for you now. And really, this is going to help understand how we go protect a Kubernetes application, how we perform the recoveries and so on, and give you a flavor for what we'll be delivering in our upcoming release. So first, I'll go through and show you how we go and protect applications. So the first thing that I'll note is that we're delivering our Kubernetes protection as part of our Polaris SaaS platform. So this comes with some really great benefits. One, we're able to bring this out as a SaaS offering, and so we're able to iterate and continue to improve this very rapidly. A second key benefit is that we have this global visibility of all of your applications, all of your Kubernetes clusters that you've connected to Polaris. And so here, this is our Kubernetes offering. We'll just go through here and we'll see this list. And what we're seeing now is all of the Kubernetes clusters that have been configured within the environment, the Polaris environment here. And I'm able to see all of these applications, all of these clusters, all of the counts of namespaces under them, as well as other information about where these clusters are located and how we're protecting them. And then as I go through, I'm able to assign SLA domains to these objects, whether I apply it to a cluster and have it inherited by all of the namespaces within the cluster, or being able to go down to an individual namespace and apply the SLA domain to a namespace, or even apply the SLA domain to a label and have that label then automatically provide protection to any namespaces that are associated with that label. So here we go through and click the Manage Protection, and then you'll see something that as a Rubrik user you'll be very familiar with, the ability to go and assign an SLA domain to the object that I'm protecting. So this is a policy-driven construct, and I'll go through and select the policy that I want to apply here. And then as I apply that policy, what will happen in the back end, that policy will be applied, and we'll begin protection of that workload in accordance with the SLA domain that you've applied. Now, one of the things that we can do to speed this process along, I'll just go and select this namespace that we've protected, and I can also do things like trigger an on-demand snapshot, for example, to go through and not just have backups that are proceeding according to our SLA domain schedule, but also trigger backups whenever I want to as well, based on the access that I have to this environment. And so really, as this goes through, once the backup is completed and we can track that within the system, I can come through and go and drill down into the namespace here, and I can see the calendar view that you'll be familiar with as well, and see the snapshot that we've just taken. So hopefully this shows you how we can very easily protect an application that's running on Kubernetes. We're able to apply an SLA domain directly to a namespace, or we can apply it to a cluster or to a label and have it be inherited by the associated namespaces. Okay, well, let's move on to the next demo. So we just talked about how we protect an application, and we've seen how we can do that on-demand snapshot, how we can then see that snapshot in the screen here. Now we'll talk about how we can recover the application itself. So what I'll do first, let's go and actually make a change to this application. Let's go delete some data. So let me go into my Kubernetes environment, and what I'll do, this application that we just protected has some persistent volume data. So this application, actually let's go and we'll open the application up. You can see it's a e-commerce application. We have some data. We have some various pieces that are being displayed here for sale. Different athletic wear and other equipment. And this is all backed by a MongoDB instance that's running on Kubernetes. And that portion of the application is backed by a persistent volume. So let's go find that persistent volume in Kubernetes, and we'll just go ahead and delete that. Okay, we can see that volume has been deleted. We can confirm that just by going back into the Kubernetes and listing out the resources and seeing that resource is no longer present, that persistent volume. So we've come in, there's been an issue, a volume's been lost. How do we go ahead and recover that? Well, as we go back to the Kubernetes environment, you'll recall that we had this ability to really drill down into the calendar view here. And you can see, we're looking at this namespace. We've got a bunch of information about the application that we've captured about this namespace, how much data it's using, the number of workloads and so on. And then here within the calendar view, we have the snapshots that we've created. So let's go down and we'll drill in and we'll see the list of snapshots that have been available. And here we can see, we've got this snapshot here that we did as an on-demand snapshot. Let's go ahead and see what we can do from a recovery perspective here. So first of all, we know the point in time that we want to recover to. And so, at this point, let's just, recover the application. Let's roll everything back. So we'll recover the entire namespace here. And this will help us to make sure that we recover the application back to this point in time that we had earlier. And, we're going to recover in place. So, we're going to recover back to the same cluster, to the same namespace that we protected. This is really enabling us to really roll back in place, including the persistent data. And so with that, we can see the cluster we're recovering to the namespace. And so we'll just go ahead and confirm this rollback here. And so as this recovery takes place, what we're able to do is really see this little pop-up here letting us know that the recovery is progressing. And now let's switch over to the Kubernetes environment. And within the Kubernetes console, we can see what's happening just by what's happening to the resources right now. And so now we can see that the application is fully recovered, the persistent volume, we can see that's now being made available again. So let's switch back over to the application. and refresh the screen here. And we can see that, yes, the application is back and running again. All of those items that were available for sale are now restored back, and we're able to go ahead and make progress there. So hopefully this has given you a good sense of what we're delivering with our upcoming solution for data protection for Kubernetes. We have a lot of great things coming, including the ability to restore your entire application that are running on Kubernetes, the ability to restore your persistent volumes and your files, as well as the ability to restore not just in place, but also to other Kubernetes clusters as well. And just to reiterate the key things that I was mentioning earlier, this is all built on the core platform of Rubrik, and that includes Polaris, our SaaS platform, and so you have that global visibility across all of your Kubernetes environments worldwide. So the ability to have that visibility to apply policies, apply protection, and perform recoveries from a single location across your entire estate. And it's also built on our immutable and secure platform as well. So you can be assured that as you're protecting your data with Rubrik, those point-in-time copies of the data are secured against compromise. And so you always have that ability to perform the restoration in the event of a data loss. You have those point in times you can restore and get back up and running as quickly as possible in restoring that key application data. So thank you so much for your attendance today, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Ben and Christina, thank you so much for that awesome presentation. Lots of great information. Christina, I really like some of what you walked us through, the why and the story of how we got here. And then Ben, thank you so much for that awesome demo. Really cool to kind of see everything in action there. So appreciate that, and lots of great insight there. Well, we've put up a little bit of a shopping list for all of you here, because what we're wondering about is what would be helpful? What's the additional information that would be useful for you? Do you learn a little bit better with getting your hands in the sandbox and playing around in a demo environment, or do you want to see some case studies? Are you looking to go straight to pricing information? Depending on what is good for you, this is the easy button. Click on your screen. Let Rubrik know how they can follow up with you and what additional information would be helpful for you, whatever way you learn or whatever way that you want to bring info back to your team. I also want to remind you that you should check out the handouts tab if you haven't already done that. And I'm going to keep reminding you about that handouts tab throughout the day, so you'll hear me say it again. But make sure that you're visiting that handouts tab and getting the Rubrik Gorilla Guide on database protection. It's actually authored by one of our awesome expert keynote speakers. So you might have heard Joey D'Antoni on a few of our MegaCast EcoCasts before doing some of the keynote chats. So you already know that he's a fascinating guy and has lots to offer. And this Gorilla Guide is a really, really great read. So make sure you've got that downloaded. Hold on to that. Save that until after we wrap. Okay, so while you're clicking on that poll on the screen there, while you're clicking on the handout, getting in any last questions to the Rubrik team, because we will make sure that those get sent on. And so you will get answers either over live chat or in email follow-up. And it is time for our very first prize giveaway. Look at that. It happened already. So we have a $300 Amazon gift card coming at you. Now, a quick reminder that you do need to be here live and present at the MegaCast in order to win. And our very first winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is Robert Harold of Kansas. Robert Harold of Kansas. Congratulations to you, Robert. Hope it's a beautiful day in Kansas, and now you've got $300 to spend on Amazon. Now, as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up the webinar. And don't forget, there are still more chances to win that gift card. Plus, we have the Kindle Scribe. Plus, we have the Best Question gift card coming at you from each session. So lots of chances to win. All right, my friends. Well, we're going to keep things moving right along here, because speaking of winners, we have our very next awesome speaker on the MegaCast here with us today. And we are definitely keeping the good times rolling here with the Progress Chef crew. I am so happy to introduce you all to Mark Trauster, Vice President of Strategy at Chef. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today on the MegaCast. I'm really excited to hear more about what's going on at Chef. I know that you want to leave some time for questions at the end, so I'm going to step back. I'm going to hand things right on over to you. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks, and it's great to be here with Actual Tech. My name is Mark Traster. I'm VP of Strategy at Progress Chef. Chef being the longtime participant, leader, and key player in terms of DevOps for now going on 14 years, I think. So today we're going to talk about security and compliance with this notion of shifting it left, which I think everybody understands what the genesis or the idea behind that is. But we're going to do it in a way that relates back to DevOps or extending DevOps to DevSecOps. So again, I'm Mark from Progress. I've had a long career in terms of practitioner on the developer side, and more recently have shifted over to a strategy role where I kind of work on the intersection of technology and business, but it's great to be here with you today. So let's go ahead and jump in. So you might be thinking, why are we talking about DevOps at a security related event or webinar? Because most of us think of DevOps as a combination or collection or collaboration between the app dev team and IT ops, which was really put in place to mitigate or eliminate the issues that we have in terms of throwing things, quote unquote, over the wall from app dev to IT ops, and then to allow IT ops to deploy and maybe manage the desktop implementation of that application. The other thing that we often see is the pigeonholing of DevOps to configuration management. We certainly aren't thinking about security front and center. But this is key. The vast majority, according to Microsoft research, a full 80% or more of ransomware attacks can be traced back to common configuration errors in software and devices. So let's let that set in. So you might think that, okay, SQL injection or vulnerable and outdated components or identification and authentication issues or sophisticated phishing attacks are a large part of what drives the vulnerability. But here, a very simple configuration error is really what is impacting many organizations, which is why OWASP recognizes security misconfiguration as one of their top 10, I think it's 5th or 6th in order of importance. So that is how configuration errors, DevOps, DevSecOps, security and compliance are all tied together intricately. What makes this even more difficult is the scale at which enterprises and any organization operates. Typically, we think of scale and security as, okay, how do I scale a physical device or a server or an operating system? But I would contend that there are many different ways that we need to address scale. People have multiple clouds. People have multiple hardware device types they need to support. People have multiple locations, either in terms of where their users or the compute capacity is actually taking place. And they have multiple architecture types. Now they're moving to a service-oriented approach with containers. And so we see a proliferation of containers or Kubernetes. And I would also argue that there's also a lot more compliance and security standards that need to be assessed and managed as well. So if you think about that scale and you tie that to performance considerations, all of which everyone has limited resources, and then to be able to do that with the utmost security and compliance, that's a tall challenge for organizations. So what we're going to spend some time on today is to really look at a couple of practical things that you can think about as you go about your software development lifecycle process. The first thing to kind of set that up is that traditional approaches really make things worse, right? If you go from dev to QA to staging or whatever, sequence of environments you have before you go to production, and then you insert a security review, then that really slows things down. It leads to frustration. It leads to long manual processes in terms of being able to comply with the security review. It often relates or identifies or requires scanning tools that generate a lot of data, which in many cases is not effective to manage. And, maybe most important relative to Shift Left is that it really pushes things downstream, We know that fixing something, addressing an issue is more costly at the end of the development cycle versus the early cycle. And this also shows the disconnect between, the security team versus the app dev team. So now let's get into some practical considerations. If you're on the DevOps side, you understand this notion of infrastructure as code. We can talk low code, no code, but at some point things are translated into code. And that's a good thing, right? Because it's something that you can use. It's something that you can implement. It's something that you can document. It's something that you can share. So what we've done in terms of doing application development and translating that code-based approach to the infrastructure definition is in large part the foundation for DevOps. What we're talking about in this context is how do you stretch or evolve infrastructure as code, or IAC, to a more substantial or broad-based focus on policy as code. So that's what we're going to hit on today, just a little bit. This, in a very simple diagram at the bottom shows where the DevOps or IT ops professionals come in that own the infrastructure configuration. And they can do that with, human readable and machine enforceable code is really, the approach that we really highlight and support. And on top of that, obviously, we're used to development, building applications, using a CI/CD process, using best practices in terms of managing that code, version controlling, being able to do rollbacks, being able to test the validity and to know where those code assets come from. All of those things in part and parcel to IAC. But this extends IAC to policy so that you have security and compliance professionals that can come in and instead of defining what their compliance or security rules are in a spreadsheet, they can simply write it in that human readable code and share that and know that it's the same code that's also being machine enforced. So a little bit lower in terms of detail is an example here that shows a simple piece of code written that you can read that is actually checking something around what's happening with the telnet server and what's happening in terms of unencrypted or encrypted communication. So I pointed to this, but it allows us to collaborate more effectively between those different constituents. It enables scalability if you have the right approach that takes that scale and allows you to apply that to your entire asset or fleet of assets. And it also allows you, with the right approach, to take one code definition and apply that to different clouds or to different operating systems automatically. What that allows you to do is to shift things left, but more importantly, or partly as important, is to be able to test throughout the software delivery process so you're not just testing in production. And then another important piece is as you configure and as you scan and you check for configuration drift, we're able to, or a DevOps approach with security is able to provide visibility into what the state of the nation is in terms of configuration, whether something has drifted, what assets across the fleet are in danger, all of those things that you need to know to identify and manage that complete fleet from, a variety of clouds to, applications that reside on the edge. Now let's talk a little bit about how DevSecOps relates or intersects or supports zero trust. I know many organizations are now looking at zero trust, how they can, move from, managing things that are quote unquote trusted to not trust anything, and what you need to do to actually make that shift. So from a people perspective, we've talked about how security professionals being integrated into DevSecOps creates that notion of DevSecOps from DevOps. But, the other important piece is to bring in the compliance professionals. I don't have enough time to kind of go through all the different capabilities and requirements and responsibilities that reside within the quote security and compliance, but there's a lot in terms of people that are, testing, people that are correcting, people that are ensuring compliance in terms of what standards that they may have to comply with. So bringing in the compliance person from a persona perspective is really that transition from DevSecOps to zero trust. And layering on the foundations of zero trust in terms of identity, device, environment, application, and data, which is a well-known concept in terms of those foundations, working DevSecOps into the picture provides that visibility and analytics to what's happening in terms of configuration and misconfiguration. And then via automation, we're able to not only automate the configuration of devices that have been bootstrapped with something like Terraform, but more importantly, to check for drift on a continuous basis, and then to orchestrate action based on anything that's found in terms of those compliance scans. That's really key. So not only can you or should be automating on a regular basis the checks, but maybe you have something that, hey, there's a customer change or a market change or something policy related, then you can easily, on an ad hoc basis, be able to identify what target nodes need to be updated and to do that in an orchestrated fashion. All of that really points to the ability and the criticality of governance across everything that you do within the software development lifecycle. The last thing that I'm going to touch upon is this notion of continuous compliance. And I've kind of highlighted that already in terms of the need to not only ensure initial configuration is correct, but to protect against drift as you move forward in the process, and that continuous compliance is not just applied to the production environment, but all the environments leading up to production. And then we tied that notion to this notion of human free zone, where you're allowing automation to do what it does well and freeing the humans to do what they do well. So pretty simple conceptually, to automate at scale, continuously checking compliance across not only production, but each of those different environments that lead up to production, which really helps you and plays a part for DevOps in the ability to, make sure that your software development lifecycle is secure, to make sure that you trust the code assets that you're bringing in, to make sure that you're not just testing in production, but you've retested in dev, QA, and so on and so forth. And the key to this, obviously, is automation, which brings us to this notion of, the human free zone. So I think we all have the concept that, humans, at least at this point, are in large part, responsible for coding when they are ready to commit a change that maybe they have worked on in their own environments. Hopefully they have the right process around a code review with something like a 2-person rule. But at the end of the day, they take what they've done, they commit that starts kind of a series of actions in terms of the software development lifecycle, in terms of committing to some type of code repository, triggering, that's a new word, triggering an automation server so that it actually does the build. And then it works to deploy and push those through the appropriate stages. And then the human is not removed from the process. The human is then notified if something goes wrong or if they have to be involved in the approval process. But hopefully, as much as you can, you automate that, not only in terms of the initial push to production, but the ongoing checks, so that if you do identify something that's drifted, that you can automatically remediate in an automated fashion back to the policy. So again, taking human out of the equation, but notifying them in terms of total visibility about what's happening in the fleet and what the status is for things that are in the fleet. So I hope this has been a great conversation for you. It's been exciting for me. In terms of the key takeaways, I think it's pretty straightforward. Big proponent in terms of using DevOps as a critical component to your security and compliance efforts. In no way, shape, or form implying that DevOps tools eliminates a layered security approach that requires a collection of different tools that protect you against all different elements of attack. But then to move from an infrastructure as code and graduate that to a policy as code approach, so that you're not just doing automated configuration management, you're doing automated continuous policy checks and automated remediation. And then I think it's also important to think about where DevSecOps can play a role within your zero trust efforts. And, to me, in terms of DevOps, DevSecOps It's all about, how can you automate the human out of the menial task-based approach where, quite frankly, we're not very good at. And that's what automated control does very well. And it frees those humans up to do something of higher value. So before I end, I just want to talk a little bit about what Progress Chef does. Progress has now incorporated Chef completely into what we refer to as our infrastructure management offering. So in addition to DevOps and DevSecOps, we have capabilities across network monitoring, application performance delivery or application delivery control, and other assets that will help you put together a complete infrastructure management approach. But back to Chef, it's really about two main things. It's helping organizations configure, deploy, and manage their entire application portfolio or infrastructure from what we refer to as any cloud to any edge, which we have organizations that are using us to manage some of the world's largest multi-cloud deployments across AWS, Azure, and Google. We have organizations that manage all different aspects of the application, from the operating system all the way up to applications that reside on the edge, which is a really interesting use case because if you think about edge deployments in terms of retail or satellites or gas stations or whatever, where you want to be able to update applications continuously because you want to introduce new applications, to be able to eliminate any application delivery issues, which can be, really debilitating. That's another interesting use case where we stretch DevOps to kind of that notion of any edge. And then to complement that is to, once things are configured and deployed, and when you manage it continuously, then security and compliance comes into play and is, key to, eliminating or minimizing as many security risks that you have as an organization. The scope or span of control is pretty broad in terms of the types of assets that we help people manage: applications, operating systems, different architecture types, all the way out to cloud native assets such as containers. Now, you may be thinking, well, how does this work with containers? Because containers really have their own mechanism for configuration deployment. They do, but then organizations struggle to make sure that they maintain the proper configuration, that Kubernetes is configured and remains configured correctly, as well as AWS or Azure or Google Cloud services to make sure that they're configured correctly as well. And we do this in a way that supports developers, operations, and then what we're here to talk about today is bringing in security and compliance to be able to shift everything left and to do this at scale. So automation at scale. So it's been my pleasure to be here today. And I just really want to thank Actual Tech for the opportunity to do that. And I think we're going to jump into Q&A. So it'll be good to hear your questions as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.
So many questions coming in. Are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, Jess. Thank you.
All right, well, let's start with this one here. Mark, you were talking about any cloud. So what role do you see DevOps playing in cloud migration and cloud native initiatives? What do you got?
That's a great question because a lot of people, when they think about DevOps, think about configuration management only as it relates to operating systems and virtual machines, and quite frankly, on-premise workloads. But we've seen a dramatic shift, obviously, to the cloud. And we really play a role, or DevOps can play a role in multiple ways. First of all, you should look for a solution that allows you to take a single DevOps approach across your entire fleet. And that means on-premise and in the cloud. And then we've had customers come to us to say, hey, I'm trying to do a lift and shift, or I'm trying to migrate my applications. I've got it configured and running under Chef. Well, with Chef, what you can do is you can actually repoint that configuration or that policy to a cloud and basically migrate by setting up the configuration automatically on any public cloud. So that's where we can play with the migration approach. And then the other piece is, what about cloud native? The other misconception is, well, if I'm using containers or Kubernetes, I don't need any other configuration management capability. And that may be true, but what you need to do after you've got it configured is to make sure that that container, as well as the supporting cloud services, don't drift over time. And if they do, to automatically remediate them so that they're back in compliance or a consistent, steady state that you desire it to be.
Well, and I think that's a great answer, and certainly something that's top of mind for a lot of folks in the audience. I'm going to jump to this next question here because this is a really interesting one. So, when I think of pen testing, perimeter controls, code scanning as security tools, I've never thought about Chef as a security tool. And so our audience is wondering, could you compare or contrast Chef to some of the more traditional tools? What do you think really makes Chef unique, Mark? What makes you stand out?
That's a great question too. I mean, the first thing is none of those tools are supported or are relevant in isolation. You really need a layered
Right.
security approach. But what's really interesting, and many people don't know this either, especially people that don't come from a DevOps background, is that Microsoft research, which we touched on, 80% of ransomware attacks are the result or are caused by misconfiguration. So that's the direct tie as to why, Chef DevOps is directly related to security. So we come in and we really focus on that configuration piece, versus a pen testing tool, which is going to look to help you identify whether you can be penetrated by hackers or something like that. Both of them are necessary, just as some level of perimeter control is there as well. So really what we entirely focus on is making sure that the configuration remains in the right state. And then you can drive that with CIS standards or any internal standards that you want. So just when you think of Chef, just thinking it maintains the configuration settings in the right way so I cannot be attacked or I'm not vulnerable to misconfiguration exploits.
That is a great takeaway, and I think something a lot of people would like to have that peace of mind. I'm going to sneak in this last question, and we've got a few more minutes left here. But it's interesting because we just had some really interesting conversations about edge, and I know that this is something that comes up for a lot of folks. So when it comes to supporting the edge, what exactly are you referring to? Management of desktop, laptop for remote users? Where are you thinking there, Mark?
You're right. There can be a lot of things, and especially when you throw IoT in there, because it can mean
Yes.
things to different people. Well, while configuration management and Chef can be used for laptops and desktops, in fact, we do that for some of the largest suites of users, including, companies like Uber. But on this side, when we're talking about edge, we're really talking about remote devices that are non-traditional. They're not laptops, they're not desktops. It could be a kiosk. It could be a point of sale device. It could be an oil well, that has some small compute capacity. And from time to time, just as you would with any set of applications, you want to push updates to it. So we have a large chain within the United States that focuses on cafes. They had 80% success rate in terms of deploying new applications. They went from using that to using Chef, and they are now at 99.99 success for every deployment across thousands of cafes with no IT operations people in the field.
Wow. That's a huge impact.
It's one of my favorite use cases, I think, because not only it wasn't a single app, right? They have point of sale, they have a back, in the kitchen machines that are running applications. I think they would run 15 different applications, including updating a camera for surveillance and things like that. So it's really kind of a cool little use case.
Well, Mark, honestly, I wish we could keep digging into this because I would love to hear some more use cases. And, and I think this is a really interesting conversation. But unfortunately, we are going to have to leave it there. But before you leave us, I'm wondering, the folks in the audience are getting a lot of information today, and some of them might be feeling a little, where do I start? What is step number one? So, I do want to know what is the first step to getting involved in Chef, but I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on sort of that general next step for everyone out there and getting started.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think most of the people that we interact with or organizations, they have a starting point in terms of some level of configuration management, whether that's using Chef or Puppet or Ansible, they usually have a starting point. And there's no reason to eliminate that starting point. But what we'd like people to do is to expand beyond configuration management so that they're doing, they may not even think of it in the sense of compliance, but to make sure that they're doing continuous state checks of that configuration. So that's where, something like Chef compliance can come in and do that. And then once they've done that, they can expand beyond kind of the traditional workloads to what they're doing in the cloud so that they use that same approach to then protect what they're doing with containers or AWS or Azure or GCP services. So I know that's very simple. We're here to help organizations. Probably what I would do is just reach out to us at Chef, go to chef.io and look at the information that we have, or say, hey, you want to be contacted, and one of our experts would be happy to sit down and kind of assess where you are in terms of your journey and to help you kind of migrate forward in your journey to DevOps and DevSecOps.
That's such an important step is really getting starting a conversation, right? And making sure that, because none of these are one size fits all tools, and you need to make sure that you have a tool that works for your organization. I mean, I suppose they are in their way, but it's always worth making sure that you're utilizing things in the way that's going to fit for you and your team and your needs. And that starts with having that conversation. It starts with exploring those needs together. And it sounds like your team is up for that challenge.
Absolutely. No, that's what we live day in and day out doing. So it's our passion.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Well, Mark, as I said, this has been so much fun chatting with you today. I hope we get to have you back on soon, because I think there's lots more to dig into. But for now, we'll let you get going. And thanks very much.
This has been awesome. Thanks, Jess, so much.
All right, well, now it's your turn to answer some questions, my friends, and we have that wish list, that shopping list, that poll, whatever you want to call it. It's up on the screen now. What we're wondering is, what's the additional information that you would like to get about the Progress Chef solution? So we just got a lot of great info from Mark, and there's obviously so much more to dig into. There's so many more layers to this conversation that you need to unpeel in that onion, right? That security onion or jawbreaker or whatever metaphor you like. So this is a great way to make sure that you're getting, what Mark was just saying, right? It's a conversation, and it's just kind of getting this started and making sure that you're getting the solutions that are going to fit in the way that you need. So a great way to start that is by making sure you have the info you need. So click on that wish list, let Progress know what they can send you, and you will get those follow-ups specifically from Chef. And keep those questions coming in. I know that there was a lot of questions that we did not get to. So I want to make sure that you all know that even though these live Q&A sessions just zip by, we are making sure that all the questions get answered either over live chat today or in email follow-up if we can't get to them in the live chat. So keep those questions coming in. Also, head on over to the handouts tab if you haven't already done that. Make sure you've got that white paper from Chef on DevSecOps, simplifying complexity in a changing world. This is a great study. It's got over 606 interviews with IT and security folks across 11 countries. I mean, it's a great read. Make sure you've got that tab open up so that you can download that after we wrap and dig in a little bit further. All right. Well, I am going to stop briefly and give away a prize, and then we're going to keep things rolling with our awesome content because we've got another cool speaker in the wings, and I know we're ready to rock here. But first up, we are going to give away a $300 Amazon gift card and a Kindle Scribe. So I will remind you all that you do need to be here live and present at the MegaCast in order to win. Our next winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is Nicoy Morrison of Wisconsin. Nicoy Morrison of Wisconsin, you've won a $300 Amazon gift card. And our very first winner of a Kindle Scribe is Roderick Fulton of Louisiana. Roderick Fulton of Louisiana. So congrats to Nicoy Morrison of Wisconsin on your gift card and Roderick Fulton of Louisiana on your Kindle Scribe. We will follow up with you once we've wrapped up the MegaCast. And don't forget, folks, still more chances to win. Plus, that best question gift card coming at you from each session. And I can tell you the competition is fierce today. You guys are alive and awake, and I love it. Keep that energy coming because we have another awesome speaker, another exciting presentation in the wings here. And I am so excited to introduce you all to our very next expert speaker here on the MegaCast, and that is Ken Weston, Field CISO at Panther. Ken, thank you so much for being here with us on the MegaCast today. I know you have a ton of great info lined up for us. I have to say, I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about Panther. So I'm going to step back. I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away, Ken.
Great. Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. Howdy. My name's Ken Weston. I'm a field assistant with Panther. And today I'm going to be talking to you about SIM. I'm not sure how familiar you are with SIM. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of SIM as well. So if you aren't familiar with it, don't worry. There's going to be a little bit of a history lesson. And I'm going to talk about how it's evolved over the last few decades, and particularly lately where we're focusing a lot more on cloud and DevOps use cases that we're trying to secure our cloud infrastructure. And I'll talk again a little bit about kind of how we've gotten here to this point, as well as some of the threats that you may want to look out for. So if you really think about SIM, it's actually over 2 decades old. It's actually old enough to drink. It's my kind of go-to joke, but it's true. It's been around for about 2 decades. But if you think about how our network and our environments have evolved over the last few years, it's really changed quite a bit. It used to be that there were 2 different components. There was security information management, which was SIM, and you had security event management, which was SEM. Now, SIM, the information management side, was dealing a lot more with compliance and sort of log aggregation types of use cases where people had to maybe retain logs for a certain amount of time, whether 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes up to a year, depending on the compliance framework. And security event management was really dealing more with the correlation engine, being able to correlate firewall events with things that are maybe happening on the endpoint. And it was incredibly powerful. And it wasn't until around 2005 when Gartner actually defined the SIM Magic Quadrant that these 2 sort of technologies were merged. The first SIM on the market was ArcSight at the time, really powerful correlation engine. Then you had Splunk, which sort of got dragged kicking and screaming into the SIM space because they were able to kind of bring in a lot of different log sources in different formats. And then you had tools like QRadar as well. And then around 2006, this boutique book company, Amazon, decided that they were going to get into the cloud space, basically take all of this sort of web hosting infrastructure that they've built and actually provide it out to other folks. And that's when we actually sort of saw the cloud come into existence. And ever since then, we've had this sort of mad drive to drive everything to the cloud for a lot of reasons. A lot of that's around cost, a lot of flexibility. It's much easier for us to build these applications. But also, as we've done that, we've had to sort of re-architect how we're handling our SIM solutions. Originally, the SIM solutions were designed for data centers, sort of on-prem networks. I don't know if you guys remember back in the day when we used to drive to offices, right? We didn't have work from home, things like that. And that's really where these tools were designed. And so once we started moving the shift to the cloud, all of these tools had to re-architect themselves for the cloud infrastructure. And there was a lot of challenges that came with that because these things that were, again, designed for these sort of data centers and on-prem, you had to make them multi-tenant. You had to make them be able to scale, particularly when you start dealing with cloud data. The volume of the data just increased exponentially. And you saw this when you started seeing people complain about cost. A lot of SIMs, legacy SIMs, such as like Splunk or Elastic, they basically are resource or ingest based on their licensing. So the more data you ingest, the more it's going to cost you. And now if you start migrating everything to cloud and you see this exponential data growth, if you're paying 10x for your SIM budget, are you really getting 10x the value? And the answer is generally no. So what we really needed to do was sort of have more of a cloud native focus. And that's where you started seeing a lot of the cloud providers themselves start to build SIMs. You saw Chronicle with Google to handle the GCP. You've seen this with Azure Sentinel with Microsoft. And then now with Panther, where we actually are a cloud native SIM, where we're able to actually bring in the data from all these different cloud platforms, SaaS applications, and really focus a bit more on, again, that cloud infrastructure. But what's interesting is that some other things have also changed, is that we need to be able to sort of decouple some of those aspects. Some people may have existing SIMs, or they may want to integrate with those tools. Or also we now have the concept of a security data lake, which provides much more cost-effective long-term storage. With Panther, we're able to bring in data from any source, particularly any sort of cloud source. We can also bring in on-prem data if we need to. We then provide a security data lake where you actually have over 1 year of searchable data retention. Now, that's really unheard of in the SIM market. Usually you're lucky if you get 30, 60, 90 days of searchable data, but being able to actually have that 1 year of data retention that's searchable, it really is a game changer. But then we also need to be able to send those alerts to a lot of different systems. It's not just your analyst that's having to look at eyes on glass and sort of triage those sorts of incidents. They need to be able to actually maybe send that to an automated process or a custom webhook, or send it to an application or a SOAR platform, which is sort of an automated tool to sort of handle a lot of how we handle some of these alerts. So it's really important that we sort of realize that the modern SIEM architecture has really changed, particularly when we're dealing with cloud native architectures. I've been with Panther for about a year now. Prior to that, I actually was at Splunk, where I was one of the first security specialists. I was there for about 4 years. Then I was actually at Elastic for 3 years, where I led security strategy. And I was amazed when I started looking at some of the top data sources that we were bringing into Panther. It was very different from what I was seeing with some of the legacy SIEM approaches, where you're bringing in firewall logs, you're bringing in all these network telemetry, things like that. With Panther, I started noticing, wow, we're bringing a lot of these log sources. We're really more associated with the DevOps processes. We're bringing in cloud logs, we're bringing in authentication, we're even monitoring GitHub, for example. And I started really digging a lot deeper into this. And I also found that one of our top log sources was custom. So with our platform, it's very easy to build custom schemas. And so a lot of our customers are actually tech companies. We actually came out of Airbnb with Jack Naglieri, who was our founder, who wasn't happy with a lot of the off-the-shelf SIEM solutions. And that's when he actually built StreamAlert. And really, if you look at this, it's really focused a lot more on SaaS as well as sort of the DevOps processes. And so, why is this? Why would we actually care more about sort of this sort of what we refer to as shifting left, where we're getting closer to the code, we're getting closer to the DevOps processes? And if you look at some of the attacks, Lazarus Group, for example, which is an APT group that's operating out of North Korea, we've seen them actually start to target developers specifically. What they're actually doing is leveraging social engineering. They're reaching out to them on LinkedIn or Slack or even in GitHub itself, where they're trying to get them to join these sort of open source projects and trying to say, hey, would you take a look at this? But the goal was to actually get these developers to download this source code and then run it. And then that source code actually had malicious dependencies. So then they can get access to that user's system. And then from there, they can actually get into GitHub. They can get into a lot of other like Okta, things like that, where they can really entrench themselves, but also maybe compromise code. They can also inject additional malicious code. So if you're a software company, this is a real concern. If all of a sudden you have APT groups or other threat groups that are trying to inject malicious code into your software code upstream that you then push out to your customers, this can be a significant impact. And a lot of the SIEM market really hasn't been watching this. They're really not targeting these types of data sources or these types of threats. If you actually look at another group, which was Lapsus, which was a group that they weren't particularly technically savvy. They weren't using any sort of zero-day exploits or anything like that. What they were actually doing was using targeting Okta. They were doing MFA fatigue. They were buying credentials. They were doing all these other sorts of methodologies to try to get access to Okta, for example. Once they get access through that, they were able to then pivot into source code repositories, where they were then look for additional access tokens, where they could then pivot into cloud infrastructure, right? So the threats that we're actually facing are very different from what we were dealing with, sort of your commodity threats of the past. And the damage that these types of threats can actually pose are much more dramatic. So if you break this down, I like to think in terms of kill chains. If you're not familiar with the Lockheed Martin kill chain, it's sort of the steps that an attacker goes through when they're going to be targeting an infrastructure. So there's sort of this reconnaissance phase. They'll try to weaponize what they find. They'll actually deliver it. And there's exploitation. Now, this isn't a new model. This has been used quite a bit, sort of in the legacy approach to a lot of our threats, but it actually applies to the cloud and what we're discussing today as well. So for example, if someone wants to do brute force, they may then get into an account. They maybe compromise that account. And then they can actually steal access tokens. And then maybe from that, they'll be able to create new users and escalate that user's privileges to, again, establish persistence. But that's not where the threat ends now. We've actually seen this time and time again where attackers have maybe targeted the traditional network, but then they pivoted into the cloud. but the organization wasn't logging that information. They didn't have visibility of those particular threats. So when the attacker pivoted into the cloud, they were safe. So although they were able to remediate the threat from within the network, the attacker was still in the cloud infrastructure. And so we can actually see that where the attack continues. They may continue to compromise keys. They may then go into code repositories. And again, they can either download code, they can inject malicious code. There's a lot of really nefarious things that can happen with these types of attacks. If you're interested in this, we actually have a workshop that we're going to be running next month where you actually will get hands-on. We're actually going to show you in GitHub, we're going to look at some of the logs. We're going to show you how to write detections, leveraging our concept called detection as code to actually write detections to mitigate these types of threats. So if you're interested in learning more about this and actually getting hands-on with some of this technology, definitely recommend going to panther.com and going to workshops. We have one around the code to cloud. We also have another one with purple teaming, again, where we talk about Okta, which is another sort of non-traditional data source that people are bringing into SIM. And we not only show you how to write detections, but we also show you how attacks actually will escalate. So I actually set up infrastructure, I attack it so you can actually see in real time how we can actually mitigate these types of threats. And that's it for my presentation. So I think now we can open it up for a Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ken. That was some great info. Lots of really cool. You got some high fives from the audience, and I have to say, I think it's a really neat thing to kind of walk through that approach of understanding the history of SIMs. And I was laughing. The first line of the one pager that is your handout, and I'll remind everyone to click on the handout in just a second. Starts with "Hate SIMs? You're not alone," which I thought was such a great kickoff to then convincing us why it should be otherwise.
Great. Yeah, definitely. I think for some organization, SIM is a 4-letter word. So.
Well, hopefully you've converted a whole bunch of new SIM fans in the audience out there. And I do want to point out before we get into some of these questions here, the wish list is up on the screen for all of you out there. So what we're wondering is, what is the additional information that you would like to get about the Panther solution? So obviously Ken just gave us a very brief insight. You know, there's so much more to get into, and this is a great way to make sure that you get the info that you need. Do you want that data sheet? Do you want to get into the pricing? Do you want to hear about case studies? So this is however you learn, whatever your good next step is, you can click on that screen right there, and Panther will send you exactly and only what you need. This is your easy button. So you guys click on that easy button there, and Ken and I are going to dig into some of your awesome questions. Thank you for keeping those coming. Ken, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's start with this one here. How can I access GitHub logs? Are they free? Ooh, good question.
Yeah, that's actually a tough question. That's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of cloud and SaaS apps is sometimes they'll actually charge for like an enterprise license. And unfortunately, GitHub, you do have to pay for the enterprise license to get access to that. But luckily, the cost is fairly minimal. So if you have a smaller dev team, you can get access to those logs. But Microsoft learned this the hard way. They were, you had to have an E5 license to get access to the logs, and they got themselves into a little bit of trouble. And now they're providing more of those for free. So what I'm really hoping is that the industry as a whole starts to provide those logs for free, because I think particularly if, data retention, if it's just like 1 day or 2 days of logs, being able to get access to that, I think is critically important and just makes everyone more secure. But currently with GitHub, you do have to pay for it. I'm hoping that changes in the future.
That's a great answer. And Ken, I'm going to keep kind of asking you some of these larger environmental questions, because, I think these are things that affect beyond just a specific solution or a specific problem that we have. And large language models are top of mind. So we're getting lots of questions about AI, and it's coming up in everything. No matter what topic we're talking about, it ends up at AI. So I'm impressed, actually, that we made it 2 questions into this chat without going to AI. But question for you now, Ken, what about the security of large language models that are being developed? Is there any security concerns around them that the audience should be aware of? And this follow-up question here, what types of threats are there when it comes to securing code for AI? What do you want the audience to know about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the challenges I think with LLMs is, well, actually machine learning and AI in general is a lot of it comes down to the data itself. The majority of data science, I'd say probably 80% of it is just cleaning up the data for the data models themselves. And a lot of people don't realize is that the data models can be corrupted. So if I'm able to actually inject data that will maybe skew some of the results of the data models, this is something attackers are already starting to do. We've seen it with sort of EDR solutions that were machine learning based, where an attacker is able to sort of slowly inject bad data into the data model, and then they're able to then bypass the model because the model doesn't know what to actually look for. So there's a lot of reasons why we then need to be able to secure the data that we're using for these data models, and also be able to monitor that. And there's new vendors that are out there, new technologies that are helping to assist with that as too. If they see that a model is being tainted, things like that. And a company called Hidden Layer is one example. But there's a lot of this that's starting to go into how we secure this type of thing too. So that's a really good question. But I think really starts about securing the data that we're using for the models themselves, and then again also securing the code that's being used for those data models. And a lot of times those are going to be in GitHub, and we do talk a little bit about that in our workshop when we actually get hands on with some of it.
Yeah, that workshop sounds like it's going to be a really good follow-up to a lot of these conversations, because I think you're right. These are questions that we need to keep digging into and exploring. And the answers seem to be changing a little bit, like large language models. This has been topic of mine for what, 2 years now?
Yeah, with like ChatGPT, things like that. And yeah, I think a lot of people thought it was this sort of amazing miracle technology, but now we're realizing that, it really is about a lot of existing data sources and things like that are its source. And so that's what really is driving a lot of this.
Well, that's interesting. And another question for you here, kind of exploring some of these threats that maybe folks should be concerned about. It's this constant fear, right? If you don't know what you don't know. So I think we're always sort of asking, hey, is there anything that I don't know that I don't have on my radar that I probably should? So question came in, what are some of the key threats that we should be worried about when securing our software supply chain? So Ken, what do you think maybe people don't know they don't know?
Well, I think a lot of organizations, they don't really look at like securing that, right? So they have sort of these DevOps processes. You have what's referred to as a site reliability engineer, oftentimes, that are dealing with the cloud infrastructure, and their focus is mostly on uptime, because if some of these applications go down, then that's a direct impact on the business. But what I think they haven't done a good job of is the security of that infrastructure. So again, I think developers are now becoming much more of a target. So I think we need to do a better job of securing not only their workstations, but also the infrastructure and the tools that they're using, having better monitoring around that. When I started talking about bringing GitHub log data into SIM, people were looking at me like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. But now we start to look at some of these threats, and we see that there really is a reason for why we want to be able to start monitoring this down at the user level. If someone maybe makes a code repository public, right, that can have a direct and very devastating impact to businesses. And we've seen that time and time again, where, again, if this type of a threat occurs, it can not only have, sort of a data breach impact, but it can also have significant impact to the downtime of your entire application in your business.
I always like to get into the real world stories, and especially when we have someone like you and working in fields as a field CISO, I'm sure you've kind of seen it all. So I'm wondering, Ken, if you could give us an interesting use case or case study that you've seen and how Panther has been applied, and then really, I'm hoping, helped solve some interesting problems.
Sure. A little bit different. So not necessarily shifting left, but I think one thing that we've sort of coined, and we're sort of the pioneers at, is detection as code. So people are always, what does that mean? But if you really think about how complex some of our detections have become, when I was at a legacy SIM vendor, they had a proprietary query language, and some of my detections were over 200 lines. And I had a situation once with a customer where they had a junior analyst that made a change to the code. And all of a sudden, it's a big financial services company. Their SOC was flooded with false positives as a result of it. And they couldn't figure out what was happening with this threat. And then come to find out, it took them several hours for them to figure out what the change had occurred. And the way that their SIM was set up, they couldn't roll that back very easily. Now, this is something that Panther solves very easily with detection as code, because we apply software development concepts to writing the detection, which means we can very easily identify what changes were made, who made those changes, and we can also very quickly roll them back. And we can do that in an automated process. So being able to have that visibility into when those changes occur in those detections and be able to roll them back, as well as deploy detections very rapidly, I think is one of the key benefits of leveraging Panther.
That brings me to what was going to be my next question. And so maybe that is the answer. But we have a couple of questions here wondering if you can give us sort of a key unique or a differentiator. What do you think really makes Panther stand out?
Well, I think the detection as code concepts, and also the fact that we're cloud native. We're able to take advantage of a lot of the various cloud solutions, such as AWS Lambdas for our detection. We actually are able to apply our detections that you write in Python, which is great. So you don't have to learn proprietary query language. Most people know a little bit of Python. If you're nervous about it, sign up for our workshops, because we'll get you up to speed within 2 hours writing detections in Python, no problem. But those detections are applied in real time, and that's a big differentiator here. A lot of times the data has to be indexed, it has to be massaged before you actually write those detections, and that's a lot of latency. So it can be hours before maybe an analyst gets to that particular alert, and by then the attacker's already compromised your entire cloud infrastructure.
Well, I think that's a great unique and a great place to sort of wrap up our conversation. Although, Ken, I have to say, I wish we could keep going, because there's clearly lots more to dig into here. And I hope we'll get to have you back again soon so we can talk a little bit more about Panther. And in the meantime, for anyone out there that is really excited and wants to jump in, wants to learn a little bit more, what would you recommend as that first step to getting started?
It's definitely go to panther.com. I like our workshops. For me, I approach it as, you don't sell a sports car with PowerPoint. You put people behind the wheel. And if you really want to experience the speed and the thrill of Panther, then I think the hands-on workshops are the best way to go. So just go to panther.com. Under Learn, you'll see workshops, and sign up. And I'll get you educated.
I'm obviously biased because this is my job and life, but I really agree that the best way to explore any solution is to have that conversation, is to jump in and start exploring, whether it's in an interactive conversation with a speaker or in a workshop, in a demo. So I hope that a lot of you out there will go sign up now. Go sign up for a Panther workshop, because that really is the best next step and the best way to get rolling. Ken, you've given us a lot to think about today. Thank you so much for coming and getting us so much wonderful information and learning lots about Panther. And I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks, Jess. Really appreciate it.
All right, and to all of you out there who are clicking on that wish list, keep that coming. Keep letting Panther know how you can follow up with them. Make sure that you're signing up for the workshops. That sounds so cool. Maybe I'll see you guys there. I'm always down to learn about a cool solution. And in the meantime, I also want to remind you to head over to the handouts tab. Be sure that you are clicking on those handouts. You can get the one pager from Panther. Now, here's a fun little tech thing for you. There was a few folks chiming in to say that they couldn't open the Panther handout. So what I'm going to suggest is, if you're having any trouble at all with the Panther handout, do a browser refresh. That is the cure-all for all tech-related gremlins. So if you're not able to open that handout, give it a quick little refresh, and then you should be able to get that. Okay, so one pager from Panther on SIM Reimagined, designed for detection as code, architected for cloud native. And it really, this is the one that I said, it starts with that line, hate SIMs, you're not alone. I just love that. Such a great way to hook you. So if you're feeling that way, go read this one pager and see if Panther can change your mind and help you detect, contextualize, and respond respond to threats at scale. All right, so that's the screen, the wish list up right now. That's the handout tab. That's a lot of great things. Now let's do a quick prize giveaway and keep things rolling with our awesome MegaCast here today. So up next, we have a $300 Amazon gift card and a Kindle Scribe. These are going to go to 2 lucky winners here live and present at the MegaCast. And our $300 Amazon gift card today is going to Scott Pizzelt of Ohio. Scott Pizzelt of Ohio, congratulations. You have won a $300 Amazon gift card. Oh, and I see Ehab saying the browser refresh let the Panther handout open. So if anyone else was having that problem with Panther, the browser refresh we have confirmed is the solution. There you go. All right, now we have a Kindle Scribe that is going to go to AJ Ferreira of Maine. AJ, I am probably mispronouncing your name, Ferreira. AJ Ferreira of Maine, you have won a Kindle Scribe. There's some extra vowels in there. That's what's tripping me up. There's a lot of vowels. It's like I lived in Hawaii for a little bit. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to pronounce words in Hawaiian. Like the state fish, the humu humu nuku nuku apua'a. And I was working out of Honokohau Harbor, so I had to spell that every day. Anyways, lots of vowels. We're going down a rabbit hole now, Jess. This is clearly not the purpose of our MegaCast. But anyways, I will remind you all that we will be in touch with the prize winners after we wrap, and there's still more chances to win a prize today. Plus, we have that best question gift card coming at you from each session, so keep those questions coming in. And I can tell you, folks, the competition is hot today. All right, so lots of great questions, lots of prizes, lots of info. And speaking of info, are you ready, my friends? Because we are going to head into our very last presentation of the day. Now, I know that makes many of you very sad, as it does me. However, here's the great news. We are wrapping up with a bang. Here as our grand finale, we have Matt Johnson, cloud security advocate from Palo Alto Networks. Matt, thank you so much for being here with us today to bring us on home in style. I can't wait to hear what you've got in store for us. So take it away.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I've been listening in. I'm sad it's coming to a close as well. It's been good fun from the background of the green room. Hey everyone, my name is Matt Johnson. I am apparently a cloud security advocate for Palo Alto. I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but I get to spend a lot of my time on the intersection of talking to technical stakeholders at our customers, working on Palo's open source security products, and also working with our awesome security R&D and product teams. So no complaints here. I'd love to talk to you today. And leave some time for Q&A about our view of like what is this whole shift left thing, and kind of the way we see the current application security landscape, the way we see the problems that it causes developers, operations, SRE, whatever the heck you want to call those teams nowadays, because there's a million different ways to describe them. But yeah, I want to give you all a picture of it and what we're trying to do about it within Palo Alto under our security tool, Prisma Cloud. So a little bit about me and how to get hold of me if you want any follow-ups after this. My details are on the screen. As I said, I work for Prisma Cloud as an advocate of cloud security. I've been securing infrastructure since cloud meant renting 20 worldwide racks in 20 different data centers and putting your own kit there. I've been using containers since Solaris branded zones, if anyone remembers those. You'll have to let me know at the end in the chat or polls if I'm on my own there. The picture doesn't do the grays on the side of my head justice, but Solaris branded zone should give you a pretty accurate timeline. Hobbyist pen tester, love all things kind of security and cloud security especially. So hi, everyone. And so what we're going to be talking about is, why do we see, what pitfalls do we see? Why is modern application security so challenging? And you'll see why I've used the phrase application security. Don't worry, this isn't just going to be about XSS and SQL injection. By application security, we literally mean the whole life cycle. Where do, issues come from? And what can we do kind of right now? What can we take away from this to deploy faster and more securely? And then turns out from the last session, seems like hands-on workshops are definitely a positive. So we'll look at some things we can do to get hands-on with some of my content. Awesome. Just a quick, what's the word I'm looking for? Not so subtle plug. A lot of what I'm going to talk about here can be achieved with open source tools. And in fact, Palo Alto has open source tools for some of the security scanning, which I'm going to go into and talk to you, ladies and gents, about today. But hopefully by the end of it, you'll see why that might not be the right way forward, depending on the size and scale of your business. And we'll get into some of the more challenging aspects of that as well. So without further ado, why is modern application security so challenging? And I am sure that this style of picture will be familiar to some of you. The concept of, castles versus villas. Back in the day when we all worked from an office, the office had a data center in it or attached to it, or a server room, depending on how big you were. I remember I just had one server back in the day, but it's fine. And it was very easy to secure. It was very easy to build a wall with security tools and monitoring tools and firewalls, and making sure the only people that could come in through that perimeter were the people we wanted. And it was quite easy to know where our boundaries were, know where our trusts were, and things like that. And as we've kind of moved out of, here is my data center, here are my staff, these are the business applications we run, as people have moved to more web-based and applications as a service, and consuming other people's APIs to move quicker, whether it be a third-party, Salesforce authentication, moving some of your inbuilt, on-prem applications to the cloud. Nowadays, the security landscape looks a lot more like trying to secure this villa. And, you've got a lot more ingress and egress points. You've got different buildings with different people that aren't necessarily talking to each other. Someone at one end of this campus is not necessarily going to know of the existence of someone at the other end, or the nuances between how those things interact. So it's a complete shift in the way we need to think about security. And you're really going to feel this pain if you're in the middle of this diagram. So if you are still in a traditional environment, and we have some kind of finance customers or government customers, or very very controlled in terms of exports and security, and that still do this whole, like, here are my servers, I can physically rip them out of the wall if I need to, I know what each one does and where it is. If you're still in that traditional environment with kind of no cloud, no SaaS, then building that kind of castle, if that is how you do business and that is not causing you any problems in terms of speed, that's fine. Like, we still know some very secure companies doing it that way. If you are a brand new startup that hasn't had time to build up a lot of technical debt, and you started completely cloud native, you're at the top of this diagram. On the right-hand side, that's probably fine as well. You've probably not built up enough technical debt to come into any of the pain points. The pain points, and it's where 99% of businesses are, is somewhere in the middle, whether you've started moving new development to the cloud, while keeping kind of your old existing databases and your old existing applications running on-prem, whether you're starting to consume SaaS, so everything's still on-prem, but you're talking to Salesforce or a cloud authentication provider or something like that. Anywhere in this middle is where the kind of two worlds of trying to secure a castle and trying to secure a villa kind of collide with each other. And to look at where these things collide, and to look at the real issue between securing in a traditional sense and securing nowadays, I want to share the pain points that I really resonate with as a developer, or as a security advocate on a team, or even as the security team trying to get a grip on the rapid pace of modern development. Because I'm going to walk you now through where issues come from. We all know, and I'd love to get a vibe for how many people in this session are kind of devs versus SRE versus product managers, and all that kind of demographic. But put yourself into the mind of a developer, or even an infrastructure developer, what we kind of call platform engineering, or SREs nowadays, building the infrastructure that other development teams consume. No one wakes up and goes, I am going to write some really insecure code today. And yet we are still inundated with, hundreds of security issues, that hitting the news feels like it's every day now, every month, every year. You get the message. And so these risks are introduced from all over the place. And I'm going to walk through a few and back up some research and some kind of evidence and some kind of cool stuff we've been looking at as to the why behind a lot of these. So it used to be the age-old, copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. Yeah, that'll probably introduce some security risks. It kind of feels that time pressure cheat code has now moved from Stack Overflow to OpenAI. People just ask OpenAI to give them code and, keep mashing that submit button until the code works for what they want to do. So you've got time pressures. You've got platform updates of the, constant dependencies and libraries that everyday development tasks are now made up of. We've got rapid development cycles, and that leads to some interesting issues around automation, which I'll cover. We've got infrastructure defaults, and the fact that realistically no one's writing infrastructure as code from scratch. Again, like third-party libraries, like copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, you're generally going to find you're using open source libraries. And then you've got upstream dependencies as well. And so, for example, the infrastructure defaults bit. We did some research a couple of years actually ago on what the state of security was with the defaults of Helm charts for Kubernetes deployments that we found online. So we went to the Terraform registry for Terraform, and then we also went to artifacthub.io for Helm charts. And across the board on both Kubernetes and Terraform, we found that you were more likely to download a insecure defaulted Helm chart than you were a secured one. And that's not great, but it's kind of what a lot of you that have, done one lap around the security world of open source and supply chain were probably expecting. And the reason's really, really simple. To boil it down into a nutshell, security versus usability, it's always a factor. And if we look at these two Kubernetes manifests here, you don't have to understand them if you're not a Kubernetes person. All you need to realize is that one is really, really long and doesn't fit on the page. And yet, if you throw both of these at a default Kubernetes cluster, to the end user or the developer that just wants his web application to spit out a web page, they will do exactly the same thing. It's just one has a load of security best practices applied. That would be the long one. And the short one doesn't, which leaves that application and the cluster itself open to a wide amount of abuse. But from a README, hello world, this is how you get your Kubernetes application running, which one is probably going to be documented? It's going to be the short one because it's easier to explain. And so that probably ends up in production. Carrying on that theme of security versus usability, OpenAI. It seems like that's where everyone goes now for, I need some code, I need help with a problem. We took our Helm research, our Terraform research, and formed a thesis on large language models such as ChatGPT and OpenAI. They're trained on the internet. As we've just seen from our original research, the internet is full of quick examples, not secure examples. And therefore, language models will likely give us insecure suggestions for code as well, because they can only be based on what they've learned, and they've learned off the public internet. And our research found basically the same balance as our manual non-AI research. We tried Bing, we tried Bard, and we tried OpenAI ChatGPT 3.5 at the time. And we found that, yep, you are just as likely to get vulnerable Terraform and vulnerable Kubernetes from GPTs and large language models as you are from copying and pasting from Stack Overflow or any of the public registries. And for those interested in the Kubernetes ones, we've got some examples of some of the checks. And to do all these research pieces, we ran our open source tool, Chekhov.io, which is an infrastructure as code and secrets scanner that will basically scan all of your infrastructure as code from CloudFormation, on templates, Terraform, Kubernetes, Helm charts, you name it, and will basically give you a load of suggestions for making it more secure. So that's all well and good, and I'm telling you that these things are, a real threat, and that a developer or someone within that organization needs to think about all of these. Let's actually have a look at how these manifest. Let's have a look at a real-world walkthrough of a common environment for infrastructure, a common application style of deployment, and look at what we actually are seeing in the real world. So this is an example customer's cloud infrastructure. I was actually talking to them about how they don't need supply chain and CI/CD security because all of their CI/CD is private and not public. So they're like, yeah, we don't use GitHub Actions. We don't use, it's all private within our AWS code build, code pipeline, code commit. Nothing is public, nothing is viewable by the public. And their application, obviously, I can't use their code, but it looked something like this. It was multiple teams in different languages with a Kubernetes-style application with effectively microservices writing to their own backend databases, which for our purposes here, this fake bank by Google Cloud Platform is a great example. So let's count the ways that this is vulnerable based on the kind of risk factors and the targets we've just been talking about. So first of all, number one, this one will probably be familiar to developers. The fact that if you have Python and you want that Python to expose a web service, you're not going to write a full kind of web handling framework in Python from scratch. You're going to use a public one like Flask. And that's great. And then you're probably going to want some instrumentation into your logging or monitoring, such as OpenTelemetry. And that's great because they're two plugins, two dependencies that you can just pull down from pip in Python, or, same for Golang or Java, pick your poison. And that's absolutely fine. Our user service depends on Flask, but Flask depends on, 50 other third-party Python modules. And one of them happens to have a really high severity 2023 CVE. And Workzug, the affected module, is actually affected in how it handles user input in JSON and YAML. And, that can be triggered effectively through our end application, making our end application vulnerable. And what's interesting about dependencies of dependencies, and we'll see this as a concurrent theme, even though we're importing Flask, the vulnerable dependency is in our code base, but it's not Flask, it's a subdependency of Flask. Yet when we go and look at kind of the security posture of that Git repo on some like online kind of, scorecard pages for security, we're not going to see those vulnerabilities that are 1, 2, 3n deep in dependency trees. We're only going to see things that are right there in the initial dependency list, which means we're potentially missing a lot of CVEs or issues that are making it into our code base. And in comparison, this is the same project looked at in Prisma Cloud, where we can see the CVE we care about, as well as a load of Java CVEs that might be 3, 4, 5 levels of dependency deep, because we're doing deep scanning across all of them. Let us look at another attack path. It's important to remember, especially if you have a team that manages your infrastructure, that your app isn't just code. It is also infrastructure, whether you have the luxury of not dealing with it or not, which is where infrastructure as code like Kubernetes and Terraform and Docker files become really important. Everything in this red box here on this beautiful graph that Prisma Cloud is building you to show your application, your infrastructure, vulnerabilities, CVEs, and how it all interrelates in a single app view. All of the stuff in red is infrastructure. As a developer, like I said, you might not even know that exists if You don't have to manage that yourself. And yet within that infrastructure, there is massive scope for issues that are just as problematic for security as CVEs. So for example, public S3 or data buckets being left open, IAM policies that allow third parties to take over roles, so many different things within this environment. Keys that may or may not allow an attacker, if they do find a CVE, to log into your Kubernetes cluster or to your AWS account or pick your favorite cloud provider. And then finally, a growing attack vector, which I'm going to finish on. The fact, and this was kind of why I wanted to show this customer who was talking to us about how supply chain didn't really matter to them. Your CI pipelines might be private. They might be behind a VPC. They might be, accessible only to your staff. All of the dependencies you're pulling into your Python applications or your Java applications or your Golang applications are probably not private. They're probably open source and they're probably fully viewable online. And before you think I'm going to go down there so people can read the code and look at the vulnerabilities, that's a known. What suddenly started to be exploited is the fact that these teams are using online CI/CD, things like GitHub Actions. And just like the open source code, the CI/CD pipelines these third-party dependencies are using are also visible because it's open source. So I can go through the dependencies of Flask. I can look at all the Python modules that Flask depends on. I can then go and find their Git repos and read through their CI/CD pipeline configurations, looking for pipeline insecurities. And if I find one, basically anywhere you're shelling out to a shell and using user input. So if someone's using the variable of a tag name or a branch name or the contents of a commit, as an attacker, that's my commit, that's my branch, that's my tag. So I can potentially use that to inject code into that CI pipeline, which means I then have control over what that CI pipeline does, which means I can edit that code base without permission. And if that code base is something your code depends on, then you're my target, but I found a way through to you through those third-party dependencies. And what's really interesting to confuse this even more is, like your code, CI can have dependencies of dependencies of dependencies too. It's quite often, and this was one of our researchers that took top 100 Git repos and looked at the GitHub Actions and where those GitHub Actions were pulling other GitHub Action code from. And as you can see, there's a chance that your GitHub Actions or your open source dependencies GitHub Actions are relying on potentially 3, 4, 5 organizations worth of code away from you. Companies you've never heard of, people you've never met, certainly not things you're going to be checking as a SOC analyst or as a developer thinking about security for potential pipeline insecurities. And what this all boils down to is this is the current landscape of things you need to care about when you're securing your application. Starts with the moment you write code, import dependencies, write infrastructure as code, all the way through to what's actually running in your cloud environments and all the CI/CD and risk of poison pipelines and exposed secrets in between. And, I work full-time in security, and I am going to struggle thinking about all of those every day and doing my actual day job. I don't think it's realistically acceptable for anyone. And even if we had a scanner with each of these, that's still 12 different lists of vulnerabilities that we need to somehow correlate. And this is where Prisma Cloud comes in, because we believe that context is king. And the idea is that our scanners build a 3D graph across everything so that you can see your application in a single pane. And I'm not talking about the CVEs for your application or the containers for your application. I'm talking about everything that impacts the security of your application. So you can click through and see, slides are being a bit slow. Give me a second. There we go. You can click through and see, okay, this is the dependencies within my application that are vulnerable. You can click through and get information about where in your entire organization you're using that vulnerable dependency. You can get a view, like I said, of the entire application, infrastructure vulnerabilities, code injection, CVEs, infrastructure issues, all in one place. So you can prioritize what matters. And then on top of that graph, also whether any of those sub dependencies have potential CI/CD or version control system vulnerabilities, which would allow a supply chain attack to potentially target you through those dependencies. So yeah, in a nutshell, I hope that's given you some things to think about, and how we're in an age where there's just too much for any one person to think about, which is why lists of issues to solve are not really that useful anymore, especially if you're moving at speed and scale. And if that does interest you, by all means, please do go and check out some of our purposely vulnerable repos, which you can test your CI/CD knowledge, your Kubernetes hacking knowledge, your supply chain knowledge, and by all means, try those against our product as well. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope this has been an awesome megacast for you all.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. That was such a great presentation and such a wonderful way to wrap up what absolutely has been an awesome megacast. So thank you for that. I'm stalling for a second because I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to get a screenshot of the links that are up on the slide right now. So please do snag a screenshot if you haven't already, because I'm going to move the slide along here. And so we've got that wish list up for all of you. And what we're wondering is, what's the additional information that you would like to get about the Palo Alto solution? So there's lots of things that can help you dive in a little bit further. Click on the poll, click on that wish list, and let Palo Alto know how they can follow up with you to make sure that you get exactly the info that you need here. And if you're interested in those workshops, obviously we don't have those linked on the wish list there. If you would like Matt or a team member from Palo Alto to follow up with you on that, just write into the questions tab, I want to learn more about the workshops. Get in touch with me about the workshops, and then they can follow up with you there. All right, Matt, we are very close to the end of time here, and I do want to be respectful of your time, but I'm going to sneak in a question or two. Do you have a few minutes to stay with us?
Yeah, by all means, go for it.
All right, you had a lot of info to cover, Matt. I was watching those slides. I was so impressed how fast you got through all of that.
Probably a few too many slides, but I'll blame that it's a bit late here, so my apologies.
Well, and there's just so many great examples. That's the problem. There's so much to talk about.
I think that's really my key takeaway. It's like, if you're living and generating code every day as a developer, like, no one really gives you these are the active things we are seeing being attacked in the wild. And, it's just overwhelming just how many areas need focusing on for like a true security posture. So yeah, hard to convey in 20 minutes, but gave it a bash.
But I think you did a great job of conveying that message. Question here from someone in our audience wondering about HIPAA compliance. Anything that you would want them to know in terms of extra steps needed to ensure web-based applications that need to be HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, so within our Prisma Cloud application, tried not to kind of go into clicking around and doing a demo. We absolutely can do that. We absolutely can give you a full test drive workshop where you can load your data in and things. Reach out to us if that interests you. But you can basically filter by a lot of things, and one of them is kind of security frameworks. So HIPAA, PCI DSS, and you can kind of filter and look at if you know that is your compliance standard you're working towards. You can effectively have the entire set of dashboards prioritized based on those risks rather than a kind of default set of warnings.
Awesome. All right. So Hannah, we've got you in our questions list here, and we can get you some follow-ups. Feel free to respond back if you'd like a little more info from Palo Alto on that. But it sounds like a good demo would be a next step for someone with a specific compliance question. Question here: can you detect where a company has vulnerable dependencies from outside a company's internal network?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything you're pulling in. So we scan those same things that I was talking about from the moment we see your code in kind of, your VCS, GitHub, GitLab, all the way through to your runtime. So if we notice a third-party dependency, we're going to unpack that to its nth degree. Effectively build an SBOM, if you're familiar, a software bill of materials, including all those sub-dependencies, and then check the entire pipeline for CVEs, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, depending on the type of dependency it is.
Awesome. Okay. Question here. I like DL. It starts with DL. I like that. Scott, dig it. DL scan Docker container config too. I'm always concerned that a container will be built with an old or non-updated vulnerable image at the base.
Yep, for sure. We scan Docker files, and not only do we scan Docker files, if you have a Docker file in your Git repo, and we will tell you if the from image through our image detection has CVEs, but also even if you don't have the Docker file and you're like writing a Kubernetes manifest with like, you know, a public like Docker image, our image scanner will get that and scan that as well. So whether it's an image you're building or an image you're using, we'll give you the lowdown on what CVEs, if any, hopefully not, but chances are there's some in that image.
All right. Well, I have to say, Matt, there's a lot more questions here, and I really wish we could keep going, but I've already kept you a little past time here, and I think we do have to wrap it up. But for anyone out there that does want to get started and jump in with Palo Alto Networks, and I see we have a few folks here who have said, yes, high five to a demo. So we've got some requests for that we'll make sure your team gets all of that. But is there any other next step that you would want everyone in the audience to know?
Yeah, do go and so check out the GOATs. We'll link to a load of other resources from there. So if you've got those, that's great. Some of them are really hands-on. You can actually spend time like putting your black hat on and hacking into CI, which again, I always think that putting yourself in the mindset of the hacker is a really good learning experience. And secondly, you know, we're really proud of the work we've done building new kind of visualizations to see your application in Prisma Cloud. The release is codenamed Darwin, so do go and check out, just Google Prisma Cloud Darwin to go and find like, you know, deep dives into all the stuff that, you know, builds on what I've been talking about and how you can kind of see your entire application in one view.
Awesome. All right. Well, Matt, you've definitely given us a lot to think about and a lot of great takeaways. I really want to thank you for doing your absolute best to cram a giant and huge topic into a 20-some minute presentation. So thanks for that. And I hope we get to chat with you again soon.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me. Cheers, everyone.
And to all of you out there who asked some great questions, keep those coming. I know we didn't get to all of them. You know, Matt will get back to a few of you on live chat if he has some time before we close up the webinar, which is going to happen in about 2 minutes here. So just so that you know, if we don't get back to you on live chat, we are going to make sure that all of those questions get sent to the Palo Alto Networks team. So you will get some responses back from them. So keep those questions rolling in, my friends, because you will get some answers back. Keep clicking on that poll and visit the handouts tab. If you haven't already done that, make sure you've got the handout from Palo Alto Networks on Prisma. It's really digging in. It's like 4 pages and a lot of it are images. So it's a really easy read on code security. So secure cloud native applications and infrastructure across the development lifecycle. This is a really, really, really great follow-up in everything that we just chatted about. Because again, Matt was trying to fit a lot of information into our short session here, and there's so much more to follow up on. So please do make sure you have these handouts. Make sure you're clicking on those wish lists. Make sure you're signing up for all these great workshops and things in follow-up, because that is going to be the best way that you can actually make sure that you're actioning some of the insight and information that you're getting from our sessions here together today. All right, well, you've all waited very patiently, and I will give away our very last prizes of the day. So we have our final winners of a $300 Amazon gift card and a Kindle Scribe. So reminder that all of our winners do need to be here live and present at the webinar in order to win. Our next $300 Amazon gift card winner is Tang Tran of Pennsylvania. And our final winner of a Kindle Scribe is Larissa Lovejoy of New Jersey. Larissa, cool name. Larissa Lovejoy of New Jersey, you have won a Kindle Scribe. All right, I'm going to read the entire winner list. I said I would. I promise. Hang on here. We have an $300 Amazon gift card going to Robert Harold of Kansas, also to Nicoy Morrison of Wisconsin, to Scott Pizzelt of Ohio, and to Tang Tran of Pennsylvania. Then we have a Kindle Scribe going to Roderick Fulton of Louisiana, AJ Ferreira of Maine, and Larissa Lovejoy of New Jersey. Congratulations to all our winners, and stay tuned for that Best Question gift card coming at you from each session, because we will be reviewing all the questions asked after we wrap, and we will follow up with our winners. So stay tuned for that. I will also remind you, if you haven't already done so, to visit ransomware.org. Make sure you spend some time exploring some of the resources there. Tons of great info and insight. Lots to spend some time with. And of course, if you're sitting on the MegaCast today thinking, hey, I have a story to tell, I'd like to get involved, we would love that. Scott, Keith, and I would love to have a conversation with you. So shoot us a message at connect@actualtechmedia.com and let us know if you have a solution that you would like to share on an EcoCast or a MegaCast. We would definitely love to hear from you. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank our speakers here with us today from Rubrik, Panther, Progress Chef, and Palo Alto Networks for making this MegaCast possible. As always, my biggest thank you is going to go to all of you. And I'm lifting the curtain here on the moderator screen because, you know, a few of you actually wrote in and asked me this morning if I was feeling okay. I do have a little bit of a bug, just a little seasonal bug, and it's totally fine. But I was feeling really low energy when we started the webinar today. And first, I want to say thank you all very much for checking in on me. I really appreciate that. And secondly, boy, the difference between where we started this MegaCast and where we ended in terms of my energy level, my brain is just lit up. They're so full of information. And that is in large part due to our wonderful speakers and also to all of you for being here. You all bring so much joy to these conversations and you really make them interesting, you know. Webinars could feel really flat and static, and they never do with all of you because you bring so much energy to it and you participate and you're here and you're a part of these really, really interesting discussions. And I am so happy that I get to spend my days learning cool things alongside all of you. So thank you for bearing with maybe a low energy start to the day. I promise I am on the mend. Rob, thank you for those well wishes as well. I see that. And again, thank you for being part of my day, my life, my job. I'm so happy to know all of you. And I hope that you got some really interesting ideas, some tips, and maybe feeling a little bit more informed about that shift left and maybe a little bit less buzzwordy now. Maybe it feels a little more real, maybe a little more tangible. And that's a pretty exciting place to start the day. So be sure that you all come back and join us for the panel cast on avoiding cloud lock-in. Now, I was chatting with the Rubrik team and with Scott, who's going to be running this about it. And it sounds like we've actually transitioned this a little bit more into a Ask Me Anything, which is going to be really exciting. So an Ask Me Anything with Rubrik coming at you. And I think that's going to be worth spending some time with. So avoiding cloud lock-in, Friday, November 17th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. That's tomorrow. Holy cow. It is November 17th already tomorrow, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Please do come back and join us for that really interesting kind of Ask Me Anything style panel cast. All right. Well, I hope that you are all having wonderful afternoons. I hope you're off to have some fun adventures in your days. I'm going to go drink some chicken noodle soup and have a little bit of a nice relaxing afternoon. But I really do want to thank all of you for spending your morning with me today, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And until I see you again soon, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.